What's up, everybody? Welcome to another session. Checking out this waning gibbous moon. Kind of nice spooky clouds. I think it just cleared up a bit. Moon's at, 72.4% illuminated, coming up at 15 degrees, rolling into Sunday morning. We're just messing around with some tracks. I posted up a new track for y'all at Bandcamp. It's in the link in the description, Prison Dagger. Some of y'all requested that, so I just kind of remixed it and mastered it tonight. Just a quick one. How y'all doing? Hope you've been having a nice weekend so far. we got it, gonna do some zoomed in shots for posterity, lunar posterity. Zoomed in here with the focal reducer on. Got Theophilus in view, right around Mare Nectaris. Theophilus is the crater to the left. And as long as the clouds don't obscure it, which they will, of course. The large crater in the middle, Fracastorius, and the crater to the right of that, the dark one with the center peak, Piccolomini. Zoom in on Theophilus. Try and get a steady shot. Theophilus with a dimensions, let's see, 101 kilometers in diameter, about 13,000 feet deep. Very defined central peaks, like a trifecta of mini rocks. Of course. Let's wait till these clouds clear. Hey, what's going on, everybody in the chat room? What's up, Vision, Duplicat, Nicholas Pitts? What's up, Lost Brooklyn? Nice to see you guys. Really cool how the clouds create some like weird interference patterns. I think it's hard to see on YouTube, but you can see it on the screen I got over here. Clouds are actually pretty cool. Always a pretty sight. So crazy, they're so orange. I guess you got the moonlight radiating. There it goes, looks like it's getting clear. Crazy. I stayed up and tried to get Jupiter last night at around 3:30, but So weird, it was just the part of the sky that Jupiter was in had this kind of hazy cloud formation that wouldn't move for like 30 minutes. So I just gave up, went to bed. See if I have the energy to try for it tonight. I'd really like to get some Jupiter, some Jovian moonage. Brooklyn, you said, did I hear news that the moon is inside Earth's atmosphere? It was info on the shelf for 20 plus years, never thoroughly reviewed. Did I really miss that? Is that like an article today? Moon inside Earth's atmosphere. Yeah, I'm not finding that. I think I definitely heard it in the conspiracy circles. I don't know, the moon seems really powerful. It's an interesting concept to think about it being much closer, but if it was much closer, it would have to be much smaller. I don't know, but I was also reviewing these pictures from the moon. Just if you type in Apollo on Flickr, it's really tough to gauge the validity of those images. They look really incredible. So it'll be an amazing experience if we go back to the moon in our lifetime. Or go to the moon for the first time in our lifetime. Oh, sweet. Let's check out the link. Oh, I see. I did see this. I just was thinking something else. Checking out this space.com article says, surprise, Earth's atmosphere extends far beyond the moon. Tiny wisps of Earth's air stretch way out deep into space, far beyond the moon's orbit, a new study suggests. Earth's geocorona is a tenuous cloud of hydrogen atoms extending up to 390,000 miles, which is, so the moon's at like 250,000, I believe, into space, according to new research from Perspective, 239,000. The moon flies through the Earth's atmosphere. So this is really interesting, considering what the implications of that are, and how the moon seems to affect our skies so directly. It does not shock me that that's the case. The moon flies through the Earth's atmosphere, study-led author Igor Balyukin of Russia's Space Research Institute said in a statement, "We were not aware of it until we dusted off observations made over 2 decades ago by the SOHO spacecraft." Yeah, this is actually really interesting. I'm going to read the rest of this. We'll see if scientists act on this data. Well, if you consider this, I'm obviously a proponent of the electric interaction between planetary bodies, and it's very possible that the moon and the Earth both kind of interlock their spheres of magnetism, or what we call atmosphere, but I'm sure the moon's atmosphere probably extends further out. So the fact that the Earth kind of extends past the moon is kind of akin to how Jupiter's magnetic field affects us. and how the sun's magnetic field affects all the planets in the solar system. So the larger, maybe not larger, but maybe the more active the body, or the more energetic, or maybe larger the celestial body, the more it affects the neighboring bodies. Alright, getting some clear lunage. I've been feeling like doing some zoomed in shots, so just being patient over here. Let's get back to Theophilus. This is what, like midway through. Of course, I zoom in and the clouds start moving back. I guess we'll need a little bit more time. West Brooklyn says, how would it affect the Van Allen belt? So apparently the Van Allen belts there are 3 different layers, and they're measured in different chunks. So there's one, I think, at like 300 miles to 500 miles, 300 to 800 miles, and then at about 1,000 miles to 5,000 miles, there's another layer. And I think there's another one after 20,000 to like a 50,000 mile barrier that kind of exponentially grows. But they're saying that the Earth's atmosphere, quote unquote, extends to like 350,000 miles, which is really far. And, you know, I guess it's measured by the length of the magnetic field. I think if you can get measurement readings on, I'm wondering how that is measured actually. I'll have to do some research on, I don't know if it's radio telescopes or they're measuring it based on radiation, or I guess maybe Soho satellite probably flew through the Earth's atmosphere and they're kind of extrapolating data from fly-throughs. I'm trying to guess, but that's what it seems at first glance. Yo, good morning, y'all. What's up, Ellie Wynn? How you doing? Rolling calmly into Sunday. Had to wait till the moon came out. I was like, how late till moonrise? Kind of jumped ahead so quick this week. I'm gonna hang out at this region, Theophilus top left. Kind of wait till it gets a bit clearer. Hey. Throw me some comments, let me know how it's feeling on your side of the world, in your part of the place, in your part of space. I'm real chill right now. Not low energy, but probably, I've been talking all day, having chats with people, good people, talking about science. Then I got back and I was like, all right, I'm gonna try and work on some tunes. So I dug out Prism Dagger, because that was requested the other night. Polished it up a little bit, did some mastering, not much. Just kind of got it ready for prime time. If you want to check it out, it's in the description. The link is there. It's in Bandcamp. And maybe I'll play it later. Added a little bit of guitar in the background. It's fun, man. It's so hard to find the time to sit and do like 4 hours of music. Nice, Ellie. seeing any moon, or is it cloudy? West Brooklyn, I'm taking a look here. I'm going to check out some of these distances of the Van Allen radiation belt. Just so the measurements I gave earlier are not jiving. So it says Earth's two main Van Allen radiation belts extend from an altitude of 640 to 58,000 kilometers. So yeah, 400 miles to 36,000 miles. Yeah, that's sort of what I was thinking. And I guess below that there is also a level of radiation, but I guess they don't call it a Van Allen radiation belt. But if you really look at the images of the X-ray, the Chandra X-ray telescope, you'll see that the magnetic rings of Earth emanate outwards in like a toroidal donut shape. And if you see all those plasma models, you can kind of imagine that they're really high-density magnetic rings around Earth, and they kind of they start really low density on the ground, where we're standing and walking around, and then they get more and more powerful to a certain point, and then they get less and less powerful as they extend out into space. And like, they don't really explain it in these null zones. So in public science, they kind of say, you know, ions are trapped and satellites float. But really what's happening is that just the same way if you hold two magnets together and they snap together, and you hold two magnets at opposite ends and they repel each other, and they create this thing called counter space. So in between that counter space and in between magnetic field densities, what I think is happening is that there's this thing called a null zone, where there's no magnetic pull in either way. So there's essentially a zero gravity area between two magnetic shells, one of space, the space vacuum, and one emanating from Earth, and probably interacting with the moon's extremities as well. So you have these different null zones, and that's where I guess satellites can go and expend very little energy and kind of stay in perpetual, you know, falling orbit. You know, the other thing that's interesting about null zones and the density of magnetic fields is what is happening with the optical interpretation of space through these fields and through like these null zones. And you know, if light travels, or if we just experience light as a perturbation in the field, you know, are the different densities of the magnetic fields affecting what we perceive as, you know, the speed of light or distance, or just, you know, is it distorting the image? Is this idea of gravitational lensing due to the fact that you have different densities of magnetism affecting light waves? Gravity well. Yeah, apparently we are at the bottom of gravity well. I don't even know what that means, because I have this sense that, you know, the sun is moving and the earth is moving, all the planets are kind of moving in this spiral continuum, maybe towards the bottom of a gravity well, but the bottom, there's always another way to go. Maybe it hits another point and then starts coming out of the well, back and forth. Ellie says, rain, cold and gray, no moonage here for now. Well, glad I can provide it for us. You get to chill and just let me do the work. Alright, here's the new mix of Prism Dagger. Yo, what's up, Miguel? How you doing? Hope you're having a good night tonight. Good morning to everybody else. East Coast time. Just being patient with these clouds. I thought it was going to be clear, but definitely being stubborn tonight. Every time I go in for the Zoom. And then last night it was so silly. Y'all probably hear it sometimes, but I drop the telescope remote all the time just because it's one of those really incredibly silly designs. It has the old analog telephone cable, and it's got this weird curve. It doesn't want to set on a surface, and it's always pulling away from you. And so this brand new remote that I got fell just on the part of the glass where you can't read the second line of the display, so I can no longer align the scope properly. Sucks so bad. So I dug out this old remote from the early Nexstar that I had, and somehow it's sort of working. It's a bit jerky, but I'm gonna have to invest in another hand remote, the 5th one. It's one of those things I lay in bed at night thinking I should redesign and send Celestron the plans. Alright, so maybe we can get in some zoomage right now. The area to the north right now next to Sea of Tranquility and Sea of Nectar. Zoom in right here. This is the region. To the left, Tranquility. To the right, Mare Nectaris. And then right in the center, gonna zoom in on Theophilus. One of the cooler craters in relief. When you got the full moon, it's really hard to see this, but during the crescent phases, the waning phases, waning Gibbs, you get to see this in all its glory. If it actually gets really clear, I'll take out the focal reducer. For now, just keep it wide. Moving over to the right, this is Fracastorius crater, and the little crater to the left of that is Beaumont. Coming in right under the shadow, you kind of see what looks like a very interesting ray structure in the center of Fracastorius. It's hard to make out, but we'll come back to this in a little bit. Then you kind of see this little dog's paw leading into a dark crater with a central peak. That's Piccolomini. Quite a large crater, 88 kilometers across, around the same size as Tycho crater. Fracastorius was also really large with a flat floor, going at 124 kilometers across. Right now, dead center, like I said, got Piccolomini, and we're going to keep moving to the right. There's this crater that's kind of inset inside like a couple of mountain ranges. That is Stiborius. Stiborius C to the left of that, and then to the right of that you got Waller. Yo, what's going on, Tom? Just find some background tunage. Alright, so like I said, the inset crater Stiborius, to the right of that Waller. Underneath that, you got a whole series of craters, almost like a trifecta. You got 3 that are not very featured and 2 that are kind of, wow, that's really cool. I'm just gonna set here and I hope it focuses for a second. Those 3 next to each other from left to right are Zagat, Rabbi Levi, and Riccius. Did I really find a song where I'm singing? Jesus Christ. Chill track. Chiller track. That's a chill track. That's a chill track. All right, so again, those three kind of flattened out craters, Zagat, Rabbi Levi, and Riccius. And then the kind of smaller one in the middle of the two flattened out ones. Kind of really want like a pointer that I can point at the screen and y'all can see it, but can't. Little crater Lindenau, and above that Rothman are the two craters that center on the screen right now, the two small ones in the middle. All right, so I'm gonna keep going along the Terminator line, name a couple more interesting features. These are, again, I don't think we've even talked about Stiborius before. Really nice detail on the regolith. Just let it focus a bit more, it's crazy. All right, showing up right here, you got a small crater to the left, almost like a craterlet blister. To the right of that, you got a darkened crater with a little crescent moon in the central peak. That is crater Nikolai to the left, and to the right is Pitiscus. Pitiscus, I think. Let me just double check. Yeah, Pitiscus, 83 kilometers, with a crater on its rim, leading into another larger flattened out crater, which is Hommel, Hommel. Vision says, looks kind of like washers and nuts at the bottom of my toolbox. It always looks like, to me it looks like those rocks you find on the beach that have been weathered, like the porous white rocks. And then almost like concrete in certain areas, like poured concrete. Going down here, going down, you can see this very interesting feature which casts like a long shadow, almost looks like a bug. The periodolia is strong on the moon. I'm gonna settle here, and you can kind of see also what's very cool is that this feature seems to have two little like tentacles in its head where the eyes are supposed to be for a worm, and they're casting like a little shadow to the left that is pointing out. Like, so you have the darkened shadow that's pill shaped, and you have the two protruding features to the, that are being shadowed out. Let me know if y'all can see that while I try and find what that feature is called. I feel like this is Mutus to the left, M-U-T-U-S, and to the right is Manzinus. I think that's the feature that I'm talking about, with a little drop shadow. I'm gonna keep creeping, crawling down. This is Scomberger, I think, Scomberger, and a couple of other craters here. Simplio Curtius and Pentland. It's hard to really pinpoint these from here. Suffice to say, it is busy territory. Kamat Spray, or Chamat Spray, says, maybe a stupid question, but what are those raised areas, tower-like, inside the middle of the craters you showed at the beginning? So those are what they refer to as, what are referred to as central peaks. They're like usually mini mountain ranges that are in the center of many of the craters on the moon. Not all the craters, but a lot of the prominent ones. And, you know, there are different theories as to why they occur. So for example, as I go back up, you'll see, even with darkened craters, that you'll see a glinting center point. Here again. And there's a flattened crater that you don't really see the central peak, but it's really in shadow. And getting back to the original crater that I started on, which is Theophilus, which has one of the most defined central peak regions, almost like three rocks intersecting each other. But they're not rocks, they're about the size of, they're about 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers tall, 3 kilometers across, I guess, 4 kilometers across. Actually, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's even more, like 5 to 10 kilometers, because Theophilus is, Theophilus is 101 kilometers across, says circular formation, having a remarkable trio with Cyrillus and Katharina. So Cyrillus is the crater that's kind of interlocking with it. So you see how Theophilus is above and Cyrillus is below, making almost like a figure 8. And then Katharina is the crater to the bottom right now. So you got the trifecta. But of course, Theophilus is one of the most carved out and unique looking craters. So it says tormented and steep slopes overhanging sinus apparatitis, asperitatis. So that's, I guess, a region inside Theophilus. From 1,200 meters and supporting Cyrillus to the southeast, Theophilus F to the west and Nadler to the east, very high walls with terraces overlapped. They don't really talk about the formation of Theophilus, for example, so a couple of theories that it could be if lunar craters are made by impact strikes, then perhaps it's remnants of the impact ballistic. If craters were made with electric arcing discharge, then perhaps it is fractured materials where the pinpoint of the arc blast occurred. So it's basically dug up material from the center point of that region, and then because the blast happened from the electric arcing, it created the rim of the crater on the sides, but essentially the only point that was touched was the center. So impact craters assume that you're going to blast this region that is the size of the entire crater itself, or a little bit smaller, but that you'd have this impact and then you'd get this cratering. Seems much more likely to me, just personal beliefs, that if you have that blast at a pinpoint strike, that you have emanations of a wave that can create the rims of craters and volcanoes and like earth, land blisters. Feels like impacts that large would devastate the region to the point where you wouldn't really have any detail left. So Kamat spray art, does that sort of answer your question, or was I completely off tangent? Off on a tangent. Got some clouds coming in again. All right, drinking coffee at 1 a.m. What's new? It's really pretty fascinating. I was talking about it on the last show, but 2 shows ago I was talking to a cat who comes into the chat room named George Kalasowski. And we always have this kind of back and forth about electrical scarring craters versus impact craters from bombardment. And it's just so crazy because I really did some research over the last couple of days trying to just verify that what I was saying at least is worth debate. And you can see these videos about ballistic and impact strikes. They're just so primitive with the whole cake pan and flour and cocoa and then dropping like a metal ball and just claiming that, oh, yep, that's how Tycho was formed, that's how Copernicus was formed. It just seems so like the Twilight Zone. But again, could be impact strikes. Duplicate says, wow, giant asparagus, asparagitis, Sinus asparagitis. Some of these names, especially like ones with 4 eyes in them, I can barely see them on this tiny screen. I mean, written in this tiny font. Tom says, no glancing blows, not likely impact craters. You know, I try and kind of just be open-minded about it all, because you do have like these emanation arcs from the center of this, so like it does sometimes look like you could theoretically, you know, look at a bullet hole, like a bullet hitting a glass, for example, or like a pickaxe hitting like a sheet of ice, and you get these kind of fractures. But my argument, in a way, is just like the complexity of the patterns emanating from the central points are just so indicative of Lichtenberg patterns and basically vibrational frequency patterns, like more cymatics and fractals than actually these random breakpoints that, you know, like when a bullet hits glass, it breaks. It looks like a spider web fracture, but in fact it actually breaks at the weak points of the composition of the glass, or the weakness of the composition of the Earth, for example, if there was an impact strike. So on the moon, you'd think that there's a lot of asymmetry would happen with these craters, but they're so many craters are identical in their features, and like craters on the rims of other craters, the central peaks, the definition of the edges, the depth of them are all almost the same depth. That's the other thing. Like, you'd think impacts would come at different speeds, at different sizes. They'd create like some craters that should be like, you know, 30,000 feet deep versus 5,000 feet deep, but they're almost all the same depth. So that's a few ideas. Camart says, amazing, cheers man. Looks like a good spot to sit with a J or a beer and watch the Earth. I'd love to get up there and have a walk around one day. Yeah. Yeah, man, it's a good place. Like, I used to live up north, and finally getting down to an area where you can see the sky on a regular basis and see the moon all the time, it's just crazy. It just changes your life. Talk about it all the time. Coffee at 1 a.m. Yeah. Vision says, could be from electrical discharge. Yeah, thanks, Viz. I went back and actually looked at the Billy Elverton stuff. You know, every time I postulate it and kind of put it in front of people, I always go back and check those videos myself to make sure like what I'm talking about is at least sort of on point, you know. But really, he blasts it with this kind of sheet metal, and he puts it on these surfaces that actually look, of course he doesn't have lunar simulation material, but, you know, clay and rock and a little bit of moisture, and you have the basic terrain of what is probably every Earth-like planetoid. Not to say that I think the moon's composition is probably very interesting and not exactly like Earth's, but that being said, still you see this, even if you're just assessing features on Earth like the flat top mountains, or, you know, Devil's Canyon, or South Africa, or the Grand Canyon, or different rock formations in Ireland. You got these hexagonal cellular pattern rocks that just appear in nature. So these things are innately electrical structures, and like you could argue that they're also sonic or sound waves. But really, everything I feel like it can be transmitted electrically. So. Yeah, so he creates all these features, you know, and I don't think it's in laboratory you're gonna blast this tiny piece of clay or sand and do it really quickly. You're gonna get in like 10 minutes you're gonna get these features. But on a planetary scale, you know, you have something where you can start to extrapolate what that possibly means. So I feel like, you know, contemporary science could really just immediately jump on board with testing for impact theory using electrical discharge in a laboratory. Especially the laboratories with funding. It's kind of shocking that we don't have reports in phys.org about, you know, electrical discharge experiments done with lunar simulation regolith and features produced of the scale of, imagine them doing like electric discharge bolts at, you know, 6x6 or 12 by 12 foot containers of the soil as opposed to, tabletop. And you can really see what you'd really have to blast it with something like, 200,000 volts or something probably higher than that, like 1,000,000 volts. But I'm sure we have stuff like that. 1 gigawatt. 1 gigavolt. Yo, what's up, Bashar Jade? Long time. Nice to see ya. Ashra Temple. All right, so we got a little bit of moonage. Let's get back to zoomage. Always talking about that electric stuff. Let's take a look at Sea of Serenity for a moment. Definitely got some air turbulence happening. Light cloud layer. At the top of Sea of Serenity, you can see some folding or sinuous rills. It's hard to gauge again. Those could be underground tunnels, or it could be land folding on itself. But I think the snaking pattern is something to look at right here. Try and find the name of this region. You got Posidonius to the top right, large crater, but running into the Terminator right now. So the snaking figure is called a bunch of different things. So there are little craters along it. To the left of it, to the very left, right under Posidonius, that little white spot is Posidonius Y, and then it goes along this ridge or the rill, Dorsa Smirnov, hits Very crater, Vrey, and then continues to snake through to Borel, and then Dorsa Lister. So you got like a whole bunch of features along this snaking sinuous rill or landfold. It's just a crazy feature to behold. It's on the scale of 300 to 400 kilometers in length. Duplicat says, removing atmospheric pressure and humidity would produce more accurate impact experiments, but hey, you work with what you got. That's true. I mean, like, see, I'm all into the idea of impact craters, but I would really love to see a laboratory experiment with ballistics into soil or landmass or clay or whatever substrate that actually mimics the lunar soil. I'm sure they have it. I've seen stuff like that, where they actually use a laser gun, no, some sort of like ballistic device that can shoot different speeds, is what I'm saying. Because bullets are ultimately like hard to, I don't know, I'm not actually a ballistics expert, so I guess you could fire one of those rail guns at different speeds. But that's the idea, is like trying to get like a varied speed ratio on impact craters hitting a simulated lunar regolith and or basically Earth. Forget the moon, just like check Earth with impact in the laboratory. I'd love to see that video. It's just, I don't think it really exists. Vision says, can't recall the channel name, but a guy has a vacuum chamber. He does tests of discharge effects. Yeah, that was that new kid that started doing it. I always forget his name. It's unfortunate, but Jake or something like that. But they featured him on the Thunderbolts project, and he talks on the Electric View sometimes. He does stuff that Billy Elverton is essentially doing, but he's blasting soil in a vacuum chamber, you know. And it's not exactly like lunar surface, but it really doesn't matter in a way, because this idea that if you have electricity in a vacuum, you're creating things like the Sapphire project is working on, which are these kind of plasmoids and extremely high temperatures and flashes and discharges. And, you know, I wonder if Sapphire project will ultimately start working on, you know, zapping materials and looking at the results. But for me, like, it's more, there are other experiments that Billy Elverton did, which is, you know, having sand in one of those boxes on a table and then running cymatic waves through it and vibrating the box using charge, and then getting these mountainous, like, erosion features that should have taken, you know, much longer time to form with wind and geological movement. And you see really an earthquake could theoretically create, like, a lot of the features that we see would take a lot of time in, you know, much less time, a week versus 100,000 years, for example. And that's just, you know, it's pure speculation on my part. But yeah, that's Billy Elverton is Mr. Too Tough 2 channel. I gotta give it to Ben from Suspicious Observers. He was, you know, talking and visiting Billy Elverton back in 2010, 2011, so he was really onto this early. But when you see some of those experiments that create these mountain ranges and the rings, especially the idea of flattened crater floors, it really doesn't make a lot of sense as to, like, how these were formed, you know, like, impacts, you know, would leave devastation, I feel, especially 90-kilometer across craters. Like, yeah, I'm not saying that you need a 90-kilometer across impact, but even if you had an impact that was like 5 to 10 kilometers across, it would blast like a giant hole in the moon. And these look like they're very, very specific shapes. Hanging out here at Mare Imbrium, moving south towards Trifecta. It's really bright, actually. Aristarchus, top right Copernicus, and bottom right Kepler. Hopefully got a little clear. And the other thing about impacts is having to hit the surface at a direct angle versus all these, I mean, you do have oblique craters, stretched out craters, but the predominant shape of the crater is circular. So you had a heavy bombardment period where you had the moon, especially the side of the moon that's facing Earth. That's a whole other factor of this discussion, is like, was the moon facing Earth the whole time when it got hit? And that is never really talked about in the formation of a moon video. They just have the moon isolated kind of around Earth, I guess, inside the belt of the accretion disk, forming into this kind of massive rock and lava, and then cooling, and then getting hit. But they don't show really the side of the moon that's facing Earth. So was Earth also hit by this heavy bombardment and early bombardment phases, which are just giant asteroid belts? Or meteor showers, meteor-like belts, I guess. Ashara Jade says, David LaPointe's primer fields. I like that one, but I don't know anything about David or if someone has duplicated his experiments. Well, the primer fields, let's see. I've heard about that. Right. It kind of all comes back to the same thing, which is the fact that, thanks Biz, I mean, you can kind of put it together with the idea of plasma science. You can check out Angry Photographer. The Aurea hypothesis is understanding of the dielectric ether and how light interacts in different densities. That plus some of the Russellian math and the geometry behind that. So you kind of put it all together in terms of how the shapes really work, but it really seems like magnetism is the manifestation. I guess dielectric magnetism, it really depends on like the chicken for the egg, but it seems like maybe within consciousness, magnetism is a manifest of, of the dielectric field at different resonances, at different densities. Magnetism, as we know it, manifests in different ways within the consciousness dielectric ether, is how I would kind of visualize the ultimate of what we know right now. And it seems like the extrapolated supersymmetry is also another factor that can be factored in, that can be thrown into the mix, because things go up and down, it seems infinitely, recursively. Yeah, it's really hard to tell if like the entire conscious dielectric field is governed by magnetism, or the other way around, where like the dielectric conscious field is the God field, and that just is. That is the Godhead, you would say, the field of consciousness, and then within that, somehow densities manifest as magnetism, and gravity, and wind, and air, and particles. I guess the idea that I was talking about the other night, where every different piece of reality that we see is just simply like a different version of the dielectric ether vibrating in a different way. And vibration is essentially sucking in the ether and spitting out the ether, like little vacuums done in a kind of split toroid, what is it? Essentially like two vortices that look like the Merkaba, and then those two energies at every level, from the subatomic to the giant, you have this energy vortex that emanates outwards in a toroidal fashion, and the counter space version is an hourglass shape, a hypertrochoid, and you have the flow of magnetism in these kind of back and forth motions, as described in Donald Scott's Birkeland currents, or Christian Birkeland's early studies of magnetic currents, winding like the two snakes of the caduceus. So it all kind of comes together under that umbrella, like all these symbols and archetypes lead back to the same thing, which is that electricity in the vacuum and in our atmosphere reacts and creates geometry that we see, and creates matter that we see, and likely creates consciousness at some level. It's actually really not as hard as it seems, but this has been like 5 years of studying this stuff, brute forcing my way into listening to this stuff over and over and over again, and watching all the videos. And you see that like we have a physics right now already that can solve a ton of problems on Earth, and start answering a lot of the big questions. It's just really sort of time to embrace that. Hey, take it easy, Miguel. Have a great one. Good night. Bashar Jade says Mississippi does teach the EU in public school. That's cool. But the teacher has to buy the stuff. But that's at least, positive to hear, because if teachers take the initiative to learn this stuff, then it's fine, really. You don't have to alter curriculum. All you have to do is use the same curriculum and describe it in better ways. So like, for example, NASA calls these Birkeland currents that are already solved and already have math and already have proof, they call them magnetic ropes that extend from the sun, or extend from the sun to Saturn. There's a whole article about magnetic ropes, but it's such a weird nomenclature to use, and that's where it kind of borders on this weird Twilight Zone nefarious, like why would you use magnetic ropes as opposed to what are already figured out as Birkeland currents, and they cause the aurora on Earth, and we already know this, so it's very strange. But it's easy to change that if you just decide for yourself. So if everybody has their own version of physics, not, like people would probably think I'm crazy for saying that because they're like, oh, you can't, we have to have consensus in physics, but consensus will come if people research things. You'll finally get down the rabbit hole and you can come out the other side, or the gravity well, for that matter. Rolling on 130 right here. So the moon is now rising further and further to the south. So now it's not the top of the windowsill, it's the right side of the windowsill that is starting to encroach on the image. This whole scoping thing is both incredibly giving and so difficult sometimes. It's also getting late a little bit here. I'm just gonna let this run to the side and call it a night. It's been a good little show chatting about the EU, chatting about the moon. Let me know if you have any questions on what I was talking about or any thoughts of your own. This is all just from my mind. I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. Duplicate says, I go to sleep listening to my EU playlist. Does that make me obsessive? Nerdy smile. No, not at all, man. Like, my idea of enjoyment was listening to Stephen Crothers doing his, breakdown of baking the Einstein cake. I mean, this dude's hilarious. I gotta say, though, Pierre-Marie Robitaille, Sky Scholar, is amazing, but also, just he breaks your mind. He's so kind of to the point, and he really has something to say, and he really knows what he's talking about. And some of that stuff is kind of I can't really listen to it over and over again like I can Stephen Crothers, or who is the other guy? Steve Smith does the stuff about instant fossilization. I like his voice. There's Peter Mungo Jupp that does. Yeah, Peter Mungo Jupp does instant fossilization research, but he is also a little bit on the catastrophist tip. It's a bit difficult to listen to over and over again. So I don't know, I've definitely binge watched my fair share of EU videos. I think I've rounded out the playlist at this point. I think I've hit repetition on their content. But it took 5 years, and I wish they would really put out more content, to be honest. Excuse me. What's up, Fantasy Ecstasy? How you doing, my brother? No. I've been getting some of my friends to watch, Symbols of an Alien Sky, and what was the other one? Remembering the End of the World. And they're an hour and a half, but it's really an hour and a half well invested to get a sense of the mythical archetypes and how they relate to contemporary geometry and philosophy, and to also hear about how people talk about science in different ways, without this attitude of just belittling people and mocking people with different ideas. And I would be remiss in saying that it does bug me that they talk about popular science being, they always say things like, I wonder why science doesn't accept this. I wonder why. But I do know that they can't actively point their fingers and say, listen, you're hiding this information. Release this information. So it's really up to us to kind of want the information out there, and for it to ultimately get out there. It's not really up to Wal Thornhill or David Talbot. They've already laid the groundwork for people to just get a sense of what this is all about. And then from there, you can kind of look at every topic scientifically through this filter of interconnectivity and light instantaneously. Instantaneity is what I was thinking, but I don't think that's a word. Yeah, so riding home with another moon show. Chalk it up as a good one. Still alive. Yo, 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 Timothy Martin. Super glad you liked the track. Yeah, I got requested to put up that Prism Dagger, and I finally did it. I mixed it a little bit better, added some guitar, and popped it up on Bandcamp. And I promise I'll be doing some more of that every time I stream. I'll try and do a song. That's a good habit to get into, because I have like 100 songs that just you guys all know, but I haven't released. Oh yeah, Duplicate, thanks for the reminder. Yeah, Halton Arp, man, like what a freaking shame that we only have 3 videos from Halton Arp, you know, and one where he's like an old man, like kind of just, you can tell he's been beaten down. But I know all of you guys have probably heard me say it like a million times, but if you're new and checking out the channel, check out Halton Arp. I have videos, I think I have links in my description for Halton Arp stuff about intrinsic redshift and how he really did the research and took pictures. He was an actual astronomer who like used the large telescopes to prove something in space. And it's such a difference when you hear him talk about it to how you hear about when you hear these NASA briefings, or you hear contemporary entertainment scientists talk about space. They're just so far removed from granularity. And somebody like Halton Arp really talks about it from a place of experience. Kamat Spray Art and Tunes. All the music you've been listening to underneath my talking has been stuff that I write, and you can check out albums. I have links in the description. It kind of started with, you know, I've always been a musician writing songs, but like when I started the channel, I was like, I should write songs for this moon show, because one, then I don't have to buy music or license stuff, and 2, like I won't get copyright strikes, and it'll give me a good reason to practice songwriting. And I got really into it, and every time I had a show, like when I first started, I would write a few songs for the show. And I've amassed a huge library of songs where I could go for hours and not repeat the song. And now I'm trying to get it all together and actually mix and master some of these things so I can release them for public consumption. Although I already have 3 albums out that I put out in 2016, so you can check that out on Spotify or iTunes, TakeBackSpace. Duplicate says, drops in a link, The Universe, Episode 1, The Cosmology Quest, The Electric Universe, and Plasma Physics. Thank you for the link. What's up, Cognition Wings? Says, lunar launch headed to the moon this week. Really? Yo, if he do to bides. Lunar launch headed to the moon this week. Let me check that out. I did look up lunar news, but I guess I missed it. Israel's lunar lander, huh? SpaceX is to do this thing. Interesting. Wait, this is like 3 days ago. On February 21st. I guess we missed it. That's so crazy. I think I was streaming then, and we didn't even talk about it. I guess I should have checked it out. So it says the Bereshit robotic lunar lander is scheduled to lift off. Let me lower this. So SpaceX launched a lunar mission. That's cool. I guess I've got to do some reading on it tonight. And oh my god, this illustration is really terrible. Yeah, I can't wait to see the photos. That's going to be great. Let's see how it all plays out. Hey, I'm open to it. I hope they go to the moon. Hope more people go to the moon. Yeah, get more and better footages. Hamat says, very cool, some wickedy acidy sounds in there. Love it. Hell yeah. Thanks. Heard about the cog, but forgot which country. Yeah, Israel and SpaceX. That's really fascinating, actually. I can't believe I missed that. It happens. Lots going on. Timothy Martin says, I watched the blast off, just more junk in space. Yeah, man, I don't know. It's sometimes hard to judge, like, if you really want the space race, if we would really want the space race to take off and kind of pollute and get all this crap out there. Even now, there's so much shit out there that it's like all gonna come crashing down one day. I don't think so. Actually, it'll burn up probably before it crashes, but still, like, we've just laid waste to space. I'm gonna correct myself. We haven't. A select group of people have laid waste to space, and we're eating the consequences as humanity. But destruction needs to happen, I assume, in order for great things to happen. Hand in hand we go, dark into the abyss. Bottom of this gravity well, huh? My own little micro side lunar eclipsey going on here. Anyway, I hope all of y'all have a great day tomorrow. Have a good Sunday. I might stream tomorrow, like around 1 a.m., right around this time. And I might skip and then do another night later. Really, I'm going to try for this Jupiter stream soon. I mean, I'd like the space race to begin simply because, like, it would really inspire people to get involved and start caring about space again. I think things would have to be talked about in a more serious way. Right now, like, space is talked about so either really deeply veiled in conspiracy and deception or doubt, or it's basically talked about really, I don't know, disenchantedly, like, oh, we once had a great space race, but no longer. And now it's really, what really happened is space is corporatized. So getting it back in the hands of people might be the best thing. I mean, the way YouTube has democratized space, I mean, I guess you have a lot more people watching those 4K ISS videos and weird. That channel is so weird. It's so strange. I'm just gonna say it because, like, it's so weird that NASA doesn't have its own official channel where it streams its own space station, but you have these weird, like, space channels that are run by who knows who that have these 24-hour streams of the space station. It looks like this front man. It's just a weird thing. Anyway, it would be great to get full-time coverage of all the planets with connected telescopes around the world. Duplicate's talking about some tragic crap where it is an advertising company is looking to launch 100 CubeSats to make an orbiting billboard. Sad face. Yep, it's already happened. Like, you got all those little CubeSats in a network grid already. If you look up, like, what's going on in the skies, all the little satellites that we can't see. And there are definitely, like, I was showing some people my playlist of flybys and satellites. And it's just so crazy. Some of them are, like, really going very, very slowly across the night sky. You can't even tell if they're stars or satellites, and they move in formation. So it depends on whether, you believe in satellites or not, but little CubeSats in the magnetic null zone about 200 miles up, like, actually is a possible physical thing. So there, what was it, I'm trying to remember the name of the satellite company. It'll come to me, it's just late. But anyway, they have a network of, like, the Iridium satellite network, that's what it was, Iridium. It's just a telecom company, it's not just a telecom company, it's like a majorly powerful telecom company that has a network of tiny satellites in the sky right now doing God knows what, running like 1,000 satellite phones and a whole ton of other shit. All right, getting dark, getting deep, getting out of here. All right, everybody, I'll catch y'all soon. Peace.